Welcome to MagicGatheringStrat. I'm Peyton, here today with another deck tech video for you guys, this time on a blue-black EDH deck, Wrexial the Risen Deep from Worldwake. I feel he's very overlooked. His abilities can be just overwhelmingly powerful, especially against other control matches, which may seem a little odd, but it really works out quite nicely for us. This is a controlling deck, not an aggressive one, and it is a budget build. It is not expensive to purchase and play, which is why I like it. Very fun to play with, great. So let's get started with the deck tech. Let's begin with the general. Wrexial the Risen Deep himself. He's a 5/8 for 6, 3 generic, 2 blue and 1 black mana. He's got Island Walk and Swamp Walk, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, we can cast an instant or sorcery from their graveyard without paying its mana costs, and then exile it. It's a pretty powerful ability, especially if we're going for disruption, which we are. Where our goal is to fill up their graveyard through mill and discard with things he can copy. Very nice effect. There are also a few enablers in this deck that enable Island Walk and Swamp Walk in case you're playing something that does not have islands or swamps. So it's just a fairly effective general, and also he's hard to deal with, probably because of his huge 8 toughness. He survives an Inferno with ease, whereas most generals won't. Also, another bonus about Wrexial, most generals are not helped out by Doran's Siege Tower because their power is either the same or higher than their toughness, whereas Wrexial's toughness is a lot higher than his power, which, even playing against a Doran deck, and essentially an 8/8 instead of a 5/8, is just a lot better in many situations. So it's a pretty powerful guy. Lots of extra bonuses, especially if we are going to be filling their graveyard with discard and mill. But let's move on to creatures. We're going to start with some utility creatures. Magus of the Coffers. He's a 4/4 for 5. You can pay 2 mana and tap him to add black to our mana pool for each swamp we control. It's pretty good. A little bit of ramp. Same effect as Cabal Coffers. Generally good. Even if we only control, say, 3 swamps, getting to play something large a turn or two early is quite nice. And we do have Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which basically turns this guy and Cabal Coffers into mana machines. It's just awesome. He's Lightning Bolt proof, which is another bonus. I'm not fond of Lightning Bolt. It kills a lot of stuff. So Magus of the Coffers, always good to have as a little bit of a booster. And he can even attack if necessary. 4 power is slightly significant in a game like EDH sometimes. Up next, we have Bane of the Living. Bane of the Living is a morph creature. It's a 4/3 for 4, where our goal is, once again, not to hardcast morph creatures. Play him face down. His morph cost is X generic and 2 black. And when you morph him, he deals... well, no, he doesn't deal. All creatures get -X/-X until the end of the turn. It's pretty good. Sort of a mini board wipe, I suppose. If you only spend 2 mana on X, he doesn't kill himself, which is really nice, and can wipe the board of annoying weenies, Gadok Teague, etc. that get in the way. Overall, pretty good. Up next on the list of our 4 morph creatures, we have Mischievous Quor. 3/3, so not overtly powerful. Its morph cost is 2 blue and 1 colorless. And when you flip him, we can copy an instant or sorcery and choose new target for the copy. And you can flip him face down for 5 mana, so it is a reusable copy effect. So pretty good, copying anything unwanted or anything wanted, just good guy to have. Morph for 3 out of 4 is Chumshell Crab. He's a 3/3 for 5. Its morph cost is the same as its casting cost, 1 blue, 4 generic. And when you flip him, we exchange control of Chumshell Crab for target creature an opponent controls. Oh, guess what? Traded my 3/3 for your Kozilek. Haha. It's overall just a pretty effective creature. Even snagging their general can be annoying sometimes, but the general's a really key player in the game plan. So, Chumshell Crab, always good. The final morph creature is Willbender. A lot of EDH decks expect you to have Willbender if you're playing blue. Well, I don't know about a lot of them, but some of them do. It is fairly common. I've seen it quite a bit in EDH, simply because it redirects as it morphs. And the nice thing about having 4 morph creatures instead of just a Willbender is that often they'll be expecting a Willbender and they'll get something like a Quor copy instead, and it's just really nice to have a little variety. Keeping our opponents guessing is something we want. It's good. adds to our tempo. So Willbender, always good, always good. And then he chump blocks after you copy, or not copy, redirect something. So stopping damage is also good. Up next for our utility creatures, we have Lord of Fugue. Is a 4/4, he's unblockable, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, we're going to look at their hand and exile something from it. Pretty good. 4 damage every turn, along with knowledge of what they have in store and the ability to snipe their biggest threats before they even hit the board. Very effective. Unfortunately, he does not let us reuse instant and sorceries with Wrexial. It's not discard, it's exile. Well, discard has its benefits and it's not so much benefits as compared to exiling. Lord of Fugue is still a valuable inclusion. Up next, we have Big Game Hunter. It's just a 1/1 for 3, and when he enters the battlefield, he's going to destroy a creature with power 4 or greater that can't be regenerated. He's also got a madness cost of only 1 black. So, you cast Read the Runes, pops out for 1 black mana, kills a guy like it was no big deal. It's honestly fine to hard cast him too. Don't always wait to play him for his madness cost, because there's only really 1 card, Read the Runes, that would enable us to do this. If you really wanted to, you could replace it with like a Necrotal, but really the only thing, usually Necrotal kills a creature with power 4 or greater, and it's not black anyway, so Big Game Hunter is good. Up next we have Alindra Leach, fairly self-explanatory, 2/3 flyer, and buffs all our black guys and our blue guys, especially good with things like Lord of Fugue that'll get +2/+2 because they're blue and black, and evasion is quite nice for swinging in a couple extra points of damage every now and then. Alindra Leach. Up next we have this dude who's going to fill up their graveyard really fast, Miro Vos, Mind Drinker. He's that 2/4 for 5 from Dragon's Maze with flying. He's also bumped up +2/+2 with the Leech, so that is nice. Evasion makes him hard to kill, and he's going to spin cards into their graveyard at an exceptionally fast rate. Whenever he deals damage to them, they reveal cards until they hit 4 lands, mill everything off the top, basically. I've even had a mill out with Miro Vos before. It's pretty awesome. But basically, if you're attacking with him and Wrexial, you can stack their abilities if they're both going to deal damage, and make sure you've always got a nice target for Wrexial to hit to make sure you're getting the most value out of Wrexial's ability. So Miro Vos, pretty good, fills up the graveyard pretty quickly. Up next, we have the king of all utility creatures in this deck, Mioin of Night's Reach. It's a 5/2 for 8, so pretty costly. But it's indestructible if you play it from its hand. It does have that divinity counter. But what's nice is then you can remove that divinity counter and force each opponent to discard their hand. Very potent stuff. Makes you a target for just about every hate card in the game after that. Makes basically your opponents are top decking to try to find some way to stop you. Hopefully by the time you reach 8 mana you're already smashing face with something else. But basically just very, very good. Expect to see a lot of hate come after this guy. So something exiling should come his way, most likely. But if you can remove that divinity counter, very nice. Then we'll move on to a few creatures that are utility and apply some beats. We've got Kagar Maro, First to Suffer. He's an XX for 5. His power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in hand. Okay, so he can be pretty powerful depending on how big our hand is. And his ability is you pay 1 black and sack him to give all creatures -X until the end of turn. So X is his power and toughness. Pretty good. Oftentimes it reads black, sacrifice this creature, Day of Judgment. We do have some draw in the deck, which can make him pretty powerful. But even so, even just Kagar Maro is a 4/4 and then using his ability to kill almost everything else on the field, just a nice creature. Now up next we've got Draining Welk. It's just a 1/1 flyer for 6, but it does have flash and flying. And when you flash it in, we counter a spell and put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is its CMC. Pretty good. You turn their 8/8 bomb that you don't want hitting the field into a 9/9 flyer for yourself. It's also got flash, which makes it tutorable with mystical teachings. That's extra value. So even if you're not necessarily going to draw into this guy and you want some powerful counter magic, you can tutor it up with mystical teachings. So very good card. Up next, we've got another beater and graveyard filler in Consuming Aberration. Pretty similar to Miro Vos, except It only reveals until you hit one land and mills that many, but it's every time you cast a spell, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our opponent's graveyard. It is a 5-cost creature, so mid-game, it can be pretty powerful. Sometimes even, 10-10 for 5 on our 5th turn is just ridiculous. It doesn't happen very often, but if you hit a lot of discard and mill, it can be a pretty powerful creature. Consuming Aberration. Up next, we have one of the biggest hate cards in the game, Dread. One of the Lorwyn incarnations. It's a 6/6 with Fear for 6, and basically makes your opponent very hesitant to attack. It's hard to block. Whenever their creatures deal damage to you, they get sniped. And when it dies, you can reshuffle it. So basically they have to find some way to exile it, or else there's a very good chance you'll get it back again. Well, not a very good chance, but there is a chance you'll get it back again. So, Dread, very good card. There's not a lot of counter magic in here, so we don't include Guile, but Dread is just as effective, really. Getting rid of basically any creature that is going to attack you is quite nice. Up next, we have another great utility creature. Steel Hellkite is great in EDH. You can pump it up. You can kill their all permanents of a certain cost if you've got the mana for it. It's also really great at destroying tokens. I've got a friend who has an Amara Tandris EDH, and this card screws it every time I draw it, because I can just choose 0 and kill every single token he's producing. Since Amara Tandris says no combat damage, well, I'm not doing combat damage, I'm just killing them all. Yay! So Steel Hellkite, always good. Up next is a kind of a strange creature for this deck, sort of Mind Leech Mass. It's a 6/6 for 8 with Trample, and it lets us use things from their hand. While it may seem strange that we're picking things from their hand instead of discarding them to Wrexial, it's actually not strange. We like using our opponent's stuff, and this is a great way to do it. It also gets a +2/+2 from Alindra Leach, making it an 8/8. So even more potent, and Trample is what really enables this guy. Almost every time he attacks, hopefully we're going to be plucking a creature or something from their hand that's going to help us out a lot. So we like using our opponent's stuff, and he's a great way to do it. There are only 19 creatures, and the last 3, we've gone over 16, the last 3 are pretty much simple beaters. Stormtide Leviathan, if you can get it out, makes Wrexial unblockable and basically hinders a lot of ground movement. Attacking for 8 every turn is great, and if you've got Wrexial in play, making him unblockable is just awesome. So, Stormtide Leviathan, applying some big beats. Up next, we also have a Body Double, and it's a 5-cost Shapeshifter, and we can scrounge their dead creatures, which is also good with the discard and mill if we somehow spin something incredibly powerful that we want to use on our 5th turn or something. That would possibly take forever for them to cast, i.e. Imrakul. Body Double's just great. And it can copy our dead creatures too. Let's say we want another Stormtide Leviathan. Let's say it gets killed somehow. Oh, another Stormtide Leviathan. So Body Double is always good. The last creature is Nightmare. 6-cost flyer, power toughness equal to the number of swamps we control. We do have Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth in the deck, which can make this guy pretty powerful. Otherwise, it's not always the best creature, but it can be a pretty effective budget beater. So there you have Nightmare. That's all the creatures, only 19, so all of them usually really count for something. Next, we have 5 enchantments, just for some extra effects, stuff like that. Spreading Seas is the first one. Snipes annoying lands, i.e. your opponent's Cabal coffers, perhaps? I don't know. Cantrips, and makes Wrexial unblockable, so very good card for only 2 mana, gives some bonuses. We also have Words of Waste, which is a 3-cost enchantment. It's actually pretty good. It can turn, if we're pretty well off on cards in hand, stuff we're going to want to play this turn, and we have a good game plan, Words of Waste can turn your turn draw into discard, and it can also turn any draw effects into extra discard, which is nice. Sticks around for quite a while. It isn't seen as a threat until you use it a lot, so pretty good card. We also have Volition Reigns. We like using our opponent's stuff, and this is just a great way to do it. We don't have a Soul Ring in this deck, so taking their Soul Ring is pretty good. It is 6 mana, but fairly effective, especially since it's enchant permanent and we get to untap it. So, pretty good card, Volition Reigns. Up next is one of my favorite cards in the deck, Painful Quandary. It's a 5-cost enchantment, and basically every time they cast a spell, they have to discard or lose 5 life. If they have no cards in hand, they have to lose 5 life. So it can deal some serious damage or make every spell they play hurt their hand. Very, very good card. The last enchantment is Weve Revoluted, a 5-cost enchantment from Future Sight. And it enchants an instant in a graveyard, and whenever we cast a sorcery, we can copy the instant and then exile it and enchant another instant. So once again, using our opponent's instant, reusing our instants. There's an almost identical number of instants and sorceries. It's 15 to 16. 16 instants and 15 sorceries. But Weve Revoluted is really good. We are never really at a lack for a target for this guy, so pretty good card. We have one Planeswalker in the deck, Liliana Vest. All her abilities really help us out. The ability to tutor stuff is great. Tutoring up anything that you need, really. Tutoring up Dread is awesome. Discard is very good, especially since it's target player, and unlike Liliana the Veil, it's not both players. Although if you do have Liliana the Veil, obviously better than Liliana Vest. And because we're dumping lots of stuff into graveyards, if you ever bomb her out and get every single creature from every single graveyard, very powerful. So Liliana Vest adding some good stuff. On to the instants. We have this 15 or 16, something like that, an almost identical number. Envelop is a 1-mana counterspell that'll counter target sorcery. It's not a dispel. I prefer countering sorceries to instants, personally. Countering an Armageddon or a Thoughtseize is really nice. Any sorcery that messes with you a bit and causes them to gain tempo, countering that is nice. So, 1-mana counterspell, very good from Envelop. Also, we want to have some graveyard hate, but remember, we want to use stuff from their graveyard. We have Wrexial, we have lots of graveyard reuse stuff, so that's why our graveyard hate of choice is Suffer the Past. It is tutorable with Mystical Teachings, and it is exile X target cards from target player's graveyard, and for each card exiled that way, they lose a life and we gain a life. So it's great. We only remove stuff we don't want them to have and we don't want to use. A little bit of life gain and a little bit of life loss for them also makes Suffer the Past very useful. I've actually won a couple games with this card when I got them down to maybe 6 or 7 life and then a little bit flooded and just Suffered the Past. So, pretty good card. Up next we have Opportunity, which is a draw 4 cards, target player for 6 mana. Pretty good. Nice with Words of Waste, refill the hand for Kagar Maro, etc. Little card draw is always good. We also have for card draw Read the Runes. Works well with a big game hunter. You can Madness it in after this. And generally, we'll discard instead of sacking permanents, but if we get something really nice, sacrifice that extra island or something. This deck is honestly quite slow, but when it goes, it is loud and it bangs opponents to death. And this card can accelerate that quite a bit. So another great card for draw is Overwhelming Intellect. It's counter magic and card draw, so both very nice. Countering something big, countering their general, even though it's not a hinder, and just drawing a lot of cards off that can be very nice. We do have Hinder, actually. Great for removing pesky generals, even great for doing something like, I don't know, Armageddon, where you don't want them to have it and kill all your lands. So Hinder's very good, great general removal. Perplex is a 3-mana counterspell, counter target spell, unless its controller discards his or her hand. Not as good later in the game. Your opponent will often be more willing to discard 1 card or no cards, possibly, than have their big beastie be countered. But early in the game, countering something pretty effective with this, or just forcing discard off of it, is pretty good. Also, you can transmute it into hinders and stuff like that later in the game if it is no longer of use. You can also transmute it into Soul Manipulation, which is pretty good. It's more counter magic and lets us return stuff. You can do one or the other. I like waiting and doing both, especially if we're trying to reanimate something very useful like Alindra Leech, Mind Leech Mass, Well, it's not reanimation, puts it in our hand. But once again, very good card. All of these are tutorable with mystical teachings. Easily transmutable. Good transmute target. Also, for general hate, we have Spin into Myth. It is a 5-cost instant. It's really in there so that we can deal with annoying generals that we don't hinder. We just put it on top of their library, Fate Seal 2. Chances are we'll put it on the bottom, since we don't want them to have it again. But just a nice card. Can also get rid of other pesky creatures that we don't want to deal with. So Spin into Myth, very good. Rather than buying some incredibly expensive board wipe like Damnation, once again, this is a budget build. We have Evacuation, which is return all creatures to their owner's hands. It is an instant, 5 cost. Very good. So instead of killing everything, we're bouncing everything. I found it to be quite useful, especially when we're flooding, and we have, like I said, we have 19 creatures. Chances are we'll only have maybe 2 at the most out at a time. 3 if we're very, very lucky. So being flooded and playing our creatures and evacuationing is just a good card for the money. Very cheap too. Not exactly an expensive card. Up next is Recoil. Bouncing a creature to their owner's hand. Actually, it's a permanent, isn't it? Yeah, it's a permanent. Sorry, I'm filming backwards. It can be a little hard to read. And then they discard a card. So it's really great against indestructible things, especially if they have no cards in hand. They're forced to discard it. Also, put something in the graveyard for use later. Especially if they don't discard it, if they have other cards in hand and they choose to discard some Duress or something. I'm going to use your Duress with Wrexial, so good card to have. One of my favorite cards in the deck, one of the biggest troll cards in the game, is Sudden Spoiling. Turning all of their creatures into 0/2s with no abilities is awesome, and it has Split Second. Just an awesome card. This, along with Bane of the Living, if you have 7 mana available at any given turn, it basically reads, destroy all creatures your opponents control. Really nice. Really, really nice. Even if you're just trying to push through some damage against the 0/2s or kill their creatures. Just a nice card. It's also, I like that it's instant speed and not sorcery speed, so we can stop a big attack and make all their creatures really weak. It's just a great card. The card I've mentioned so much, Mystical Teachings. It sees a lot of play in decks like Is It Post and Pauper, but it has great value in this deck. We can flash it back with just the Swamp, and it can search up Draining Welk or any of these instants, so it's just a very good card to have for tutoring. Memory Plunder lets us use more of our opponent's stuff. It's just a 4-cost instant, so we can play an instant or sorcery from their graveyard without paying its mana cost. Just a great card. Overall, we love to use our opponent's stuff. It's great. It's cheaper than using our own stuff, so always good. We also have Gather Specimens, which is another very expensive way to use our opponent's stuff as far as mana. Just play this as an instant on the stack just as they're trying to resolve a creature and then taking control of it. It is a 6-cost, so it's very expensive mana-wise. With the 3 blue, it can be a little bit difficult to cast, but mid to late game, taking something they really need is really, really nice. So Gather Specimens. The last instant is Redirect. We do have that Willbender, and it's basically just another Redirect. So Redirect is a very good card, especially for retargeting anything with target player. Forcing them to target themselves is quite nice. On to the sorceries. The first one is Plague Wind. Plague Wind is awesome. There is the Cabal Coffers Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth ramp combo in this deck. Reaching 9 mana is not insanely difficult, and killing everything they have is awesome. Plague Wind. Probably get one. If you don't want to use a Damnation, use a Plague Wind. It's really good. I love Plague Wind. Up next, we also have Profane Command, one of the most useful spells in the deck and its utility. All 4 effects can be very good. Fear for hard to blockness. Hard to blockness? Is that a term I can use? If it isn't, please let me know. Or killing a creature with the -X/-X, or destroying, or losing life. Sorry, I'm trying to read here. Returning target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from Oh, it does let you reanimate, so you can reanimate something for 2 extra mana, and it's choose 2. So combining effects is nice. And when you have nothing else to do, you can just have them lose X life. So Profane Command is a very good card. Mind Spring can draw an insane amount of cards, also does well with Words of Waste, another good draw effect. And it's only 2 blue otherwise for the X, so pretty effective draw spell. Mind Shatter is a pretty effective discard spell. Target player discards X cards at random. Random discard is a lot more annoying than normal discard, I find. Because rather than having them pick what they don't want the most, it's random, you know. You could hit what they don't want the most, or you could hit something they really, really want to have. So Mind Shatter is a good card. Even forcing them to discard their entire hand with this is devastating, so. Now, I chose to play Unnerve instead of Mind Rot, because it's especially good in multiplayer. For that 1 extra mana, it's each opponent discards 2 cards, rather than target player. So, Unnerve is just a very good card. Very good card. And even if they redirect it or something, or copy it, they're still going to get hit with discard. So, very good card, Unnerve. Next up, we have Cabal Conditioning, which is another great card in multiplayer. It does cost 7 mana. It's very mana intensive to play. But it's any number of target players. Each discards cards from their hand equal to the highest CMC among permanents you control. So in multiplayer, it's especially good. Even if the highest CMC permanent you have is Wrexial, or maybe Spellweaver Revoluted, it's just incredible, forcing each opponent to discard a ton of cards. 7 mana is costly, but very effective. Up next, we have Siphon Mind. Siphon Mind is 4 mana, sorcery. Each other player discards a card, and we draw a card for each card discarded this way. A lot better in multiplayer than it is in single player for discard and draw to mana ratio. In fact, it's really quite awful in single player. But you can turn it into an extra draw spell with Words of Waste, and just a pretty good card in multiplayer. Up next, we have Beseech the Queen, which is a great tutor. Usually, we just play it for 3 black. Otherwise, you play it for the equivalent of Diabolic Tutor in mana, 2 black, 2 colorless. And we can search for usually almost any card in the deck that we need at the moment with Beseech the Queen, for the amount of lands we control. So very good card overall. We also have Diabolic Tutor, which is, it's too slow for anything in Legacy and such, but it's just fine in EDH. Searching for any card is quite nice. If you have a Demonic Tutor, it's a lot better than Diabolic Tutor. You should probably use it instead. But like I said, this is a budget build, and we're going for most value, least money as possible. So Diabolic Tutor is a pretty good card for this. Up next is a devastating card, Traumatize. Forcing them to mill half of their library is insane. Puts plenty of goodies in the graveyard for Wrexial to use. And even, like I said, I milled someone out with Miro Vos once. I cast Traumatize the turn before I cast Miro Vos, and it was just insane. Half their library gone down the drain is pretty good. Don't use this against a Bruna deck. Don't do it. It just helps them out. A lot of Bruna decks will self-traumatize. You're just helping them out. Don't do it. But otherwise, very good. Another giant mill spell we have is Mind Grind. Like I said, we do have some ramp through the coffers and such. And even so, just getting a lot of land, getting flooded, we can just force them to mill a ton of cards with Mind Grind. The biggest Mind Grind I've ever done is for 11. Revealing until they hit 11 lands, and putting that many cards into their graveyard fills up the graveyard pretty quick. Even on turn 4, doing it for 2, or turn 5 for 3, pretty good card at filling up the graveyard. Making sure we have targets for Wrexial. We still love using our opponent's stuff, so we have Knowledge Exploitation. Searching our opponent's library for stuff and using it is pretty good. Instants or sorceries, you know, use their damnation. We can't afford one. So Knowledge Exploitation is a good card. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to prowl it. There are no rogues in here, but even casting it for 7 is not that bad for the effect that we do get, especially since the spell we take is free. So even using their bribery with knowledge exploitation is pretty good. We also have Beacon of Unrest, which is especially good after those giant mill spells or a bunch of discard, and it shuffles itself back into its library. So once again, there's that chance we'll get it again. And it's just really good card. Beacon of Unrest. Still using our opponent's stuff, we have Blatant Thievery. A lot better in multiplayer because for each opponent we are taking control of a permanent they control. It only costs 1 more than Gather Specimens and is a lot better than Gather Specimens, especially in multiplayer. So Blatant Thievery, if you are playing a 4-player game, getting 3 permanents for 7 mana, some of which could cost a lot more than 7 mana. Blatant Thievery is just a good card, especially in multiplayer. The last sorcery is Exsanguinate. If we flood, or if we get an insane amount of mana from coffers and Urborg, each opponent loses X life, and we gain life equal to life lost this way. Multiplayer, very good card. Spending 5 on X, you're gaining 15, and everyone's losing 5. Pretty good. A little bit of life gain goes a long way in EDH sometimes, especially against really, really grindy decks. So Exsanguinate is a good choice for an inclusion on sorcery. On to the artifacts. We have a few mana rocks and a few utility artifacts. First mana rock is Demir's Signet. Self-explanatory, filtering, adding blue-black, a little bit of fixing, a little bit of ramp here and there, so pretty good. We also have Chromatic Lantern, great fixing, and is a mana rock itself. Turns our lands into, the whole point being we never have to draw the right type of land again. We can make any mana color we want. Very good card. Darksteel Ingot is a fairly standard, probably the best budget EDH mana rock. It's indestructible, and we can add 1 mana of any color. Pretty good card. You also have Armlar Sphere. Not quite as good as the others since it's searching up lands, but as a budget option, very effective, especially if we're looking for multiples of a specific type of basic. Pretty good. We are running more basics really than anything else in this deck, so Armlar Sphere is a good tutor for that. Makes sure we hit a land drop every turn. Very nice. Now, there is probably the best utility artifact in the deck is Geth's Grimoire. Making every discard spell we have into a draw spell is really nice. Keeps our hand full, keeps Kagar Maro active quite a bit. Just a very powerful spell. Very powerful. Up next, we also have 2 equipments that make all of our threats. Like I said, we only have 19 of them. Making each of them more threatening is a very good thing. So, Wilspersil Cloak, Unblockable, and Shroud. It's kind of an EDH staple. Very effective card for bumping up damage. Unblockability is insane. Plus the fact that they can't be targeted. Slapping this on Miro Vos means 2 damage and mill every turn, and you can't stop it. Very effective. We also have Fire Shrieker, which is double strike. Fire Shrieker is really good with all of our damage-dealing creatures, i.e. Mind Leech Mass, Wrexial, Miro Vos, anything that gets an effect when it deals damage. When it's dealing twice as much damage to a player, its effect hits twice. You can win in 3 attacks by slapping this dude on Wrexial if he's unblockable, which is often the case because a lot of EDH decks do play blue and black mana, or blue and black swamps and islands and the like. So Fire Shrieker is pretty good. It's also fairly cheap, especially I have the Mirrodin version, but it was reprinted in M14, so it should be pretty easy to get your hands on one if you don't have one already. Let's move on to our lands now that we've covered everything else. I'm trying to make it a budget land base. Somebody actually suggested several budget lands in the comments of the article on MagicGatheringStrat.com. You should check that out. It's sort of a chunk of text. It might be faster for you to read through it than watch this video, but please read it anyway. Suggested some things that I'm working on getting my hands on. Frost Marsh, Salt Marsh. I would personally love to have an Underground Sea and some fetches and the like, but I don't. So for a budget mana base, for blue and black lands, we have Deir Guildgate. Self-explanatory, enters tapped, blue or black. We have Dreadship Reef. You can find this in a lot of 50-cent bins at your LGS. Unfortunately, it costs mana to put a storage counter on there, but it does fix as well as necessary and turns any extra mana into some mana later in the game for storing up. Not bad. We have Demir Aqueduct, which is, I don't know, I guess you see this in a lot of trinket decks. So if you play Paper Pauper, you might have a few of these. Once again, you can find it in a 50-cent bin, most likely. And it is a common, so it's not like it's incredibly rare. But I do like that it does add the 2 mana, even though it sets us back a couple of turns as far as lands. Pretty good. I do have a Watery Grave. I do have the Gatecrash version. This is pretty good. It is an island swamp. So it is both. Really nice for Nightmare as a blue and black land. I just like the card. Sometimes we will be... It's EDH. We are starting at 40 life. You're much more willing to pay the 2 life to get your untapped dual land. So pretty good card, actually. And last, for the lands that make blue and black, we do have a Drowned Catacomb. Generally will enter untapped, especially with the number of basics we have. It's a pretty good card. Next, we have some utility lands. Utility lands are always good. We have the 2 cycle lands, Barren Moor and Lonely Sandbar. And it's just the classic Onslaught, enters tapped. Cycling, anybody who plays Pauper basically knows what these are because they're everywhere. We also have a Terramorphic Expanse. I decided not to run Expanse and Evolving Wilds because having both can just slow the deck down. And generally there's enough fixing so that we don't need both. Terramorphic Expanse. You can use an Evolving Wilds if you have one and not an Expanse. Works just fine. One card I've been experimenting with a little bit has been Nephalia Drownyard. For 3 mana, they can mill 3. It also produces colorless. I prefer this to Duskmantle House of Shadow. House of Shadow for 2 mana spins 1 card. This guy for 3 mana spins 3. Turns any extra mana into Wrexial fodder. I've had fairly good success with it. I would recommend trying it out in the deck. I think it's only about $2 or so. I'm not exactly sure on that. But it is a pretty good card. I like spinning cards into the graveyard, and it's also really funny when you're playing against a combo deck to mill that crucial combo card. So, pretty good. I would recommend it. Cabal Coffers. Yes, Cabal Coffers is awesome. Don't skimp on this card. Please splurge and get it. It has the same effect as Magus of the Coffers, except it's a land, and we love it. It's so good, and it does especially well with Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. It's all lands are swamps in addition to their other types. So playing turn 1 Urborg, tapping for whatever 1-drop. I'm not even sure if there are any 1-drops in this deck. I don't even remember. Sorry, short-term memory is not the best. But turn 2 Cabal Coffers will slow you down a little bit, but immediately wasteland and strip mine target. It's just a great card. It also means if you're getting a ton of islands and then you draw 1 Urborg, you do have plenty of black mana, turns all your islands into Guildgates or whatever. Just a good card to have. Really good card to have. And getting both is awesome. The last sort of special land, I guess, is Thespian Stage. Colorless is okay the turn you play it, and then copying lands. At one point, sometimes having this copy Cabal Coffers and having a Magus of the Coffers and an Urborg in play, you can just exsanguinate for the win or something. It's just great. You can copy their lands if you want something something useful that they have. But it's just a good card. It has seen some play in EDH recently. A lot of my friends use this card. I don't know if it's in your meta or not, but it's a pretty powerful effect. And then lastly, we just have our basics. We have 13 islands and 11 swamps. The mana ratio is well thought out. It is well fixed. It has been analyzed. So if you need to change the ratios on that, be my guest, although they should be fine. I've already calculated them. However, this mana base is incomplete. If you have an Underground Sea, if you have the fetches, if you have Vesuva, Wasteland, Strip Mine, River of Tears, any of that stuff, Underground River, use it. By all means. I'm using my Strip Mine and my Vesuva, and I don't own a Wasteland, so I don't have that luxury, but please, if you have those cards, include them. They would probably make the deck a little bit better. Liliana of the Veil is another great inclusion to have instead of Vess or adding her. It's open to tweaking, folks. It is pretty much a discard and mill focused blue-black control deck, enabling our general swinging for 5 damage, reusing their instants and sorceries. It's a pretty effective strategy quite a bit of the time. So that's the end of the tech sort of itself. And here is a complete layout of the deck, all spread out. Thank you for watching MagicGatheringStrat. Please check out the article on mggeostrat.com. It should be under the casual section. And if you'd like to see some gameplay, there is a gameplay video that has already been done in the past. It's on YouTube. If you would like to see more, please say so. Thanks again for watching.